Hi, hello, welcome to Learn Stroke IAS classes by Arjun. It's a wonderful morning here, and we're discussing the editorial summaries for IAS with Arjun R. Shankar. And uh, let's discuss some of the important today. This is the third editorial summary, the editorial summary set 3 for Crack UPSC exam 2023, exclusively for 2023 exams. Here we go. To the first important editorial was Old is Not Gold, because the main issue in this was the freshly elected Chief Minister of Himachal Pradesh, Sukhwinder Singh Sukhu, reiterated that the old pension scheme will be restored by the newly elected Congress-led government to the state. So this brings us a lot of important questions regarding what is the difference between the old pension scheme, the OPS, and the new pension scheme, the NPS. So then you should know why at least you need a pension, because that is very important. So why do you basically need pensions? And always pensions has been a big agenda for ministries to attract people, and obviously you need pension because one is not productive in the old age as in the youth age, because in the youth age he or she must have toiled very hard for the government. So obviously getting a good income in the old age is a good thing. And the rise of nuclear family and the migration of young earning members leaves the old people without money, etc. So a pension is a very good thing. And obviously the rise in cost of living is also important thing. And a lot of people, the life expectancy has also increased, so that means you live for a longer time. But after the retirement, when you live for a longer time, you become older and older every time, so you need a money support. And this actually giving an assured money income in an old age is definitely an dignified way of living. You worked your life, so that is a very, these are the reasons why you need a pension. When we discussed old pension and new pension, these are some of the reason why do you need pension. Should pension be scrapped off? No, it should not be scrapped off. And let's take a look at this under the OPS. So what is being given in this? Under the OPS, the retired employee receives 50% of the last drawn salary as monthly pension. So you should take an understanding. You receive 50%. So imagine that you have drawn a salary of 20,000 as a last drawn salary. You will get 10,000 rupees as a your monthly pension. And NPS is a contributory pension scheme under which employee contributes 10% of the salary, basic plus DA, and the government contributes 14% towards the employee's NPS account. So what is the comparison involved in this? A lot of people say that under the OPS, giving the 50% of the last drawn salary is going to be a big burden on the finance ministry or the financial aspect of the government, because a lot of money has to be pumped in for the pension. That is the reason why I told you why pension is important. So what are the reason why pensions need to be given to people who have worked for the government? And the NPS is basically, it's a contributory system. So which is the best thing is something that we have to find out, because the detractors of the OPS say that it is very very fiscally unstable, because it's fiscally unstable is what the people call it. And majority of the detractors of NPS call is the NPS politically unsustainable, that it fails to address the need of the people. That you say that NPS, the government pays it, so at one point of time it is going to be an unsustainable thing, is what NPS detractors are saying. So anyway, you should know why pension is given, and what are, this is GS paper 2 welfare. And you should know which is the best thing. First, in the first one, you definitely have a financial fiscal liability on the government, and the second one is sounds good, but a lot of people want the old system. So this was the first important article. And the second one was reflections on the fading principle of non-intervention, GS paper 2 polity governance, because this is a very popular uh, polity article, because it has a lot of Indian polity aspects involved in this. So I'll give you two main questions here, because the main issue, you can see the main issue. Before we go to the question, you should understand the main issue is the doctrine of separation of power. Because in this was recently, there was a initial debate of the president of India and the vice president of India, Both of them mentioned differently in different programs, mentioned the importance of doctrine of separation of power. That means separation of power between legislature, judiciary, and executive. So President Murmu said it in a different context, and Vice President said it in a different concept. So both of them have initially said about the importance of doctrine of separation of power, especially legislature, judicial, and executive. Then the question come: why have they said it? Because now the classic question of debate nationally is the Supreme Court appointment, especially the appointment of judges, the pendency of cases. That brings us executive versus judiciary. And this is very classically the most important problem, being the National Judicial Appointment Commission was scrapped off by the Supreme Court collegium system. So whether we should have the National Judicial Appointment Commission like body, or should we have the collegium system where judges elect judges? So this is the basic uh, turf of fight in the last few months: the judiciary versus executive. So a lot of the executive definitely feel that the judiciary is overpowering the government, and the judiciary feels that the government is trying to get an extra hand at the functioning of judiciary by influencing the appointments of judges, etc. So both of the people think, judiciary thinks executive is uh, incursion or transgressing, or the executive thing judiciary is trying to transgress. So this is the basic issue of the article, and I'll give you two questions. GS paper 2 polity: separation of powers with its own boundaries is mandatory, but breaking the boundaries is a functional reality. Separation of power within its own boundary is mandatory, but breaking the boundaries is a functional reality. Critically analyze the statement in the light of recent incidents. So, second one: in a democratic governance, basic of any basic structure is the prevalence of the primacy of the mandate of the people reflected in the parliament, which is giving to the power of executive and the people who are in parliament working. So, basic of any basic structure is the prevalence of the primacy of the mandate of the people reflected in the parliament comment. So both of the power talks about the separation of power. So you should know, if you have not read, please understand what is separation of power, why executive, judicial, and legislative should be optimally functioning with togetherness and in tandem. Because you should know that the office of the president is always above politics. So the article also talks that the office of the president is always above politics. So even vice president has to be fundamentally above politics. He should not speak excessively for the government. He should be above the politics, and only one important area where the vice president has equality is regarding the casting vote in case of an equality of votes under the consideration of Raj Sabha. So other than that, the president, the vice president should all be, rising above the politics and talk about the country. Because yeah, this is the important article. This talks about basically all these aspects. Moving on to the next important editorial is the RTI, or the column is RTI Act fulfilling its purpose. Is the RTI fulfilling is the purpose? So the major important theme of the this article, the main issue is regarding whether something that was actually passed in 2005 by the Parliament, the Right to Information Act was passed by Parliament in 2005, which was giving people the access to records of the central government and state government in a time bound manner. Wow, that was a good governance, right? Whatever the government, state government is doing, whether is it actually doing in the right direction for the benefit and welfare of the people of India, you get that information in a time bound manner. So when you travel across almost close to 20 years down the line, in 2022, when you look at the RTI, how is the RTI performing? Is it performing in the right direction? What are the important challenges that the RTI faces is the main issue of the article. And I'll give you one main question regarding GS paper 2. Is the right to information ensuring transparency between citizens and the government as it was intended to? Examine the statement. So is it doing the right, is it actually working the way it was basically established to? You have to examine this article. So question: so is the RTI ensuring transparency between the citizens and the government it was intended to? So you need to bring out the important aspects also. And Let's discuss the important aspect, because the RTI, as I said, was passed in 2005, and the RTI has been very important and prime in regarding, because the people who hold high office to account, people have used the RTI to know what is happening with the taxpayers' money. And the RTI was also able to expose big ticket scams like Adarsh Commonwealth Games, Vyapam scams, etc. And they have also exposed human rights violation, bringing accountability to people. And you should know that a large number of percentage of RTI applications are filed by the poorest and the most marginalized sections in India. So you should know that obviously the government, uh, you should also, it has also unearthed the scams. It has what is happening with the taxpayers money. And most oftenly the articles say that the government is not liking the information, and whatever you the people ask for information, normally government do not like majority of the RTIs is one such area. And the article talks about an example of COVID-19, for example, when the government was asked about how many people lost their lives due to lack of oxygen, about the number of migrant workers, the government said we don't have any data. And in many of the cases, even the RTI, when you give an RTI, the concerned officer say that this is not in his division. I don't have any information on this division. You have to find who is actually handling this. So that has created a big lag in the RTI. So the according to the act, it is not the duty of the RTI, the litigant or the people who has filed RTI, to go and find who is the person concerned to give the information. It has to be the main officer who has to find out, delegate that thing for the officer, and give the information in a time bound manner. So this is basically the RTI. It talks about the important challenges like this, and the not the disinterestedness for giving data, not interested to give data. So all these things are the important points regarding RTI. Next is regarding countering terror. So this is GS paper 2, international relations. The main issue is regarding the counter terrorism cooperation, because you know that recently India and Pakistan are at loggerheads. They are actually warring horns, because uh, India is actually December. India is actually chairing the UN Security Council because it's a rotation basis, and India has called Pakistan as the epicenter of terrorism. And recently, the Bilawal Bhutto has also called India as the biggest terrorist country sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan. So, in this context, uh, the Minister Jaishankar's initiation regarding what are the better counterterrorism cooperation is being discussed here. And I'll give you a main question here. What is the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism? So that's a very important question. What is the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism? How is it helping counter terrorism globally? What are the major concerns you have to discuss? So this article basically talks about the major hurdles for counterterrorism cooperation in the world. So what the counterterrorism cooperation, these are the hurdles. Number one, the state's support for financing terror. Majority of the global terrorism, you see that the state is supporting the financial terror. And the multilateral mechanisms that are opaque and agenda driven, they're very opaque, and they are not seeing the right problems, the multilateral mechanisms. And double standards and politicization of counterterrorism, majority of the states which is sponsoring terrorism. And the use of next frontier. What is next frontier? The use of emerging technologies such as drone and virtual currency by terrorists. So these are some of the important major hurdles of counterterrorism cooperation. And if you want to do a joint counterterrorism cooperation globally, the countries have to overcome, address these four major issues. So this is very important. And the article also talks about the US and UK, which actually struck the biggest blow to the sanction regime by holding talks with the Taliban. And it also talks about the P5 country. So what do you mean by a P5 country? We have to discuss, which is called P5 plus 1 country, because a P5 country, China, is continuously blocking the designation of Pakistani based terrorist, including 5 people named this year from the Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. So China is actually blocking the, because you know that China and Pakistan are good allies. And whenever India is moving a resolution regarding the blocking of designation of Pakistan based terrorist, China is actually blocking that move, the P5 country. So this is again a big hurdle. And in 1986, India's proposal was given. What was that proposal? That is this proposal called Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. And 1986, a lot of people, India has given this proposal, and the P5 countries, the permanent members plus 5 countries, are hopelessly polarized and irrevocably they are in different directions. Like recently Ukraine war came, so everybody's behind that war. Nobody is realizing the importance value of Comprehensive Convention of International Terrorism. So you should know that India proposed this convention in later on in 1996, and the Comprehensive Convention of International Terrorism, that is CCIT, is a proposed treaty that intends to criminalize all forms of international terrorism and deny terrorists their financiers and support of funds, arms, safe havens, etc. So you should criminalize all forms of international terrorism and deny terrorists from getting financial support and even arms, weapons, etc. So it has not been reached for the adoption of the convention. India has been trying since. So this is India's contribution or India's initiative in the global counter-terrorism. So definitely this is very important. CCIT. You have to remember this CCIT concept. And what is P5 plus 1 countries? The P5 plus 1 countries basically refer to the UN Security Council's 5 permanent members, namely China, France, Russia, UK, and the US. These are P5. Plus 1 is Germany. So P5 plus 1 is often referred to the European countries as the E3 plus 3. It is E3 plus 3 or P5 plus 1. So know about this from GS paper 2. Next is regarding the dangerous gamble, and Turkey should use its geopolitical advantage to crush the Syrian Kurds, the Kurdish people. So this main issue regarding the article is between the fight between Turkey and Syria. Because just like India and Pakistan, you should see that Turkey's border areas are occupied by the Kurdish people or the militant group which is operating in the southeastern parts, and there is a group called PKK or Kurdistan Workers Party. So they have been creating problems in Turkey. So the recent trigger was a November attack in Istanbul that killed 6 people. So just like we say India, Pakistan, there is a border issue. Turkey's borders and there is a group actually operating in the parts of Turkey, and they are the Kurdistan people or the Kurdistan Workers Party. The Kurdish militant group is actually creating a big time problem to many of the people, and Turkey has reportedly asked there is another group called the People's Protection Unit. So there is Kurdistan Workers Party, PKK, and Turiya Sarkia Bodia, and you should see that Turkey has blamed the Kurdistan Workers Party or the PKK and the militant group operating in the southeastern parts, and the People's Protection Unit or YPG. This is a Syrian Kurdish militia for the blast. So they have their own problems between Syria. So that is the reason why Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan wants to create a buffer zone between the YPG controlled towns in Syria and Turkey's Kurdish territories. Because Turkey has carried out a lot of incursions into Syria, and which were controlled by the Syrian National Army. So what happens is when you should know that Turkey and Syria, when the militant group like PKK and YPG are with the support of Syria are creating problems in Turkey, what will happen is Turkey will keep moving on to Syria and create problem and chaos in Syria. So this has created a big problem between Turkey and Syria. And you should know the PKK. And where is this Kurdistan? Where is Kurdistan? So you should know the Kurdistan generally comprises the following 4 regions: the southeastern Turkey, the northern Iraq, the northwestern Iran, and northern Syria. So that is the northern Kurdistan, southern Kurdistan. So when you see which of the following geographical areas contain the Kurdistan, you should know it contains Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria. And when you talk about the PKK, they are a militant organization and armed guerrilla movement which is historically operated throughout Kurdistan, but now is basically based in the mountains of Turkey, Iraq. And PKK is definitely is actually designated as a terrorist organization by Turkey. So this is the issue between Turkey and Syria. Just please remember the important issue of India and Pakistan, and how, just like in this case, Turkey is acting like India, asking to stop the incursions. And but this time you should know Turkey is also getting into Syria and creating problem, which India is not. India is not getting into Pakistan and creating problems. So remember this issue from GS paper to international relations. Moving is GS paper 1, history and culture, forging a connect along the Ghats. This article, the main issue, it talks about the Kashi Tamil Sangamam. The program aims to celebrate the bond between Kashi or Tamil Nadu under the framework of Ek Bharat Shrestha Bharat, which seeks to enhance interaction between people of different states and union territories. So the article talks about very important aspect like Kashi and Tamil Nadu have been historically linked in various aspects. So what are the aspects you should know from a history perspective? You should know that the Tenkashi and Shivagashi temples in Tamil Nadu are said to be inspired by Varanasi's Kashi Vishwanath after the Pandya king Adhivira Rama Pandyan went on a pilgrimage to Varanasi. And you should know the ancient Indian philosophers from Tamil Nadu like the Ramanujacharya traveled to Kashi to get the important spiritual learning. And you should know the city that has enhanced Adi Shankaracharya's and Ramanujacharya's learnings, the Kashi, is very important. And even in Tamil Brahmin weddings, you should know the groom embarks on a Kashi Yatra before he's called back to marry the bride. So you should know that when the bride, when the groom actually goes on a Kashi Yatra before he's called and he's asked to come back and marry the bride. So Kashi, and even there is a mention of Kalyani Dam, which runs through Kaveri River, was built during the time of Karigala Chola. So it talks about a Kalyani Dam, which has inspirations. So the Tengashi and Shivagashi temple. So Kashi, from a spiritual and architectural temple style, there is a lot of inspiration between Kashi and Tamil Nadu. That is the reason why Tamil Sangamam is happening. So GS paper 1, history and culture. Moving on, next is international relations, GS paper 2. This is an editorial from Indian Express. So all the editorials that we saw was Hindu, and now we are discussing Indian Express, very important editorials. Nothing but it was written by P. Chidambaram, playing Chinese checkers. So Chinese checkers is actually a game like chess. So in checkers, what happens is you cannot go back. Checkers can either only you can move ahead or you can go sideways. That is the game checkers. So this article, the main issues between the problem of India and China in the line of actual control. The problems happening in line of actual control is the major issue. And one of the major issues that has been addressed is what is the hot springs in LAC? The hot springs or petrol point 15. That is something that has been discussed here. Because hot spring or traditional name is Kiam is a campsite and the location of an Indian border outpost in the Chang Chenmo River Valley in Ladakh. So there is a river called Chang Chenmo River. The Chang Chenmo River Valley is in Ladakh and is near the disputed border with China. So this is named because there is a hot spring at this location, and the line of actual control near Konka Pass is just 3 kilometers to the east. And what is happening is the Chang Chenmo River Valley, the hot springs camp, is still a debated talk. So what is after even several round of talk, China has conceded nothing on hot springs. So that is petrol point number 15. So the article talks about this hot spring. So if you do not know about this hot spring, so please understand, every time we talk about LAC, we don't talk about this. And the spot is basically named due to the presence of a hot spring in the area. And this is one of the 4 important points where the Indian and Chinese armies went face to face during the 2020 problems. And even China has refused to have a discussion on the hot springs and refused to have a discussion of disengagement of troops in the Despang Plains and the Demchok Junction. So Despang Plains and Demchok Junction, they have refused to have a discussion. And more buffer zones has been created. You can see India is importing from China 4 times more than what India exports to China. So the trade deficit stood at 73.3 billion. So there is a trade deficit. India is exporting 4 times more than the export to China. And China is trying to create more buffer zone. A buffer zone means Indian troops can no longer patrol in that area as it was doing it before 2020. So it can be expected that China will demand another buffer zone in the Yangtze region. You should know where is Yangtze region. We have discussed in the yesterday's or 2 days back in 17th or 16th December current affairs news. We have detailed discussed about Yangtze. You can go back and watch it. And a buffer zone means that no Indian troops can patrol in that area. So in this context, please do know about the hot springs of LAC and why this is a problem. And also remember the important the Chang Chenmo River Valley in Ladakh. Moving on to the next is regarding the this is also an Indian Express editorial, which is the funding the transition. GS paper 3 environment clean energy. So this is regarding funding the transition. So you should know the whole article talks about the emissions, the carbon, the historic emissions, and you see the article clearly say that more than 92% of historical emissions are attributable to the developed countries. But the developed countries are actually historically emitting, and the burden of solving this problem is largely dependent on the developing countries, who are hardly just 8 to 7% of the contribution of emissions. So the developed countries emissions, the burden is equally shared by the developing countries also, which is a gross injustice. And the economic impact of climate change is disproportionately borne by the vulnerable developing countries. So it also say that around 58 vulnerable countries just account for 5% of global emissions. They are not getting the cost of money to solve this problem. So climate finance is also something that it is talking about, funding the climate finance. What are the different ways you can fund the climate finance? And it says that the UNEP estimates that around for climate adaptation would require around 160 to 340 billion dollars by 2030. So you need anyway between 160 to 340 billion dollars to fund the problem of climate change and climate finance. So you show that the climate financial or support or climate financial support is highly inadequate, with developing countries receiving only 1/3 of what is being done. So the problem is basically created by the developed countries, 92% emissions, but just less than 5% of the emissions. The fund that the developing countries get is very inadequate. And it also talks about the Green Climate Fund. In the past, there have been funding facilities such as Green Climate Fund, which were meant to support adaptation and mitigation. And the recent announcement of L&D fund, which is the loss and damage fund, is having the attention of the article. Hope it can actually do some betterment. The L&D or loss and damage fund. So it talks about green funding. So this is regarding GS paper 3 environment. And next is regarding an important article, keeping the net internet neutral. So this is regarding GS paper 3 technology. So what is this brings us two important questions. What is net neutrality? So what is net neutrality? The government says the keeping the internet neutral. So this is bringing a new concept of net neutrality. So net neutrality is nothing but the principle that internet service providers should enable access to all content and application regardless of the source, without favoring or blocking particular products or website. So just because internet service providers should actually, that is neutrality. They should be neutral. They should give all the content without regardless of the source, without favoring or blocking any particular products. So if there are 10 services there, if the first service provider or second service provider is actually giving more number of money to the internet service provider and saying that please push us in the front and do not publish block the channel of provider number 3 and 4. There are 10 people, and the first and second people are giving more money and asking that please don't block or create problems for the sixth and seventh people because they are our competitors. So that is not a neutrality aspect. Net neutrality means it should be regardless of the source, without favoring or blocking any particular product or website. It should be given. That is the concept of net neutrality. And the network should treat all communication passing through them equally, independent of their content, application, service, device, sender or recipient address. It should be net neutrality. Indian government came out with the policy of net neutrality, which stipulates the telecom network should be neutral to all the information transmitting through it. So you should know that India is one of the largest consumers of wireless internet with over 800 million users. So this is also very important. And the article also talks about what is the Digital Markets Act. I discussed this article in a previous editorial set during the ex ante regulations of digital products. So this is nothing but it's not India's. The European Union has recently enacted what is called as a Digital Markets Act, which has got its approval in 2022 and is going to be implemented by 2023. It aims to keep digital markets innovative and open to competition through ex ante regulation. That means ex ante means rather than result, focus on the forecast. You have a speculation that okay, these are the problems that can happen. Ex ante regulation, and the Digital Market Act will prohibit the implementation of the most harmful anti-competitive practices by the largest digital platforms. So this is actually an ex ante legislation, actually a speculation to be ready with the problems before the problems come. Because anyway, digital platforms, like big digital platforms, are going when they become more bigger in the future, they will create anti competitions which can harm the common service providers. And to avoid this, European Union has created the Digital Markets Act, which is an ex ante regulation which is keeping in the future. If there is a problem like in the future, the Digital Markets Act can regulate the digital markets. It's a good step, very good step. And this can be a question also. So these are some of the most important editorials that we have discussed in today's editorial series. So please do watch it and learn all this, and subscribe Learn Stroke IS classes by Arjun, and keep reading and learning.